The first minute of any documentary sets the tone, so let's open strong. When you study the Second World War long enough, you start to realize that victory wasn't always secured by firepower or brilliant strategy. Often it came down to something far more primitive, the ability to disappear. Camouflage wasn't just a support technique, it was a battlefield skill that determined who saw whom first, who fired first, and ultimately who lived. And if you're watching this on The Prepper Historian, make sure you subscribe, because today we're diving into one of the most overlooked aspects of wartime survival, one that modern preppers and historians alike can still apply with startling effectiveness. Camouflage rooted in nature, not paint, not netting, nature itself as an ally in deception and survival. Now, let's get straight into the real history and the real skills. How major powers studied nature to build the art of disappearing. By the late 1930s, every major military realized that traditional parade ground uniforms were a death sentence. Germany observed how leopards vanish into broken shade patterns and how tree bark fractures light into irregular strips. That study produced the first mass-issued disruptive camouflage patterns, including the early plane tree and oak leaf variants used by the Waffen-SS. The principle was simple. The human outline kills you. Break the outline, you break the enemy's detection instinct. British forces learned similar lessons from naturalists studying bird plumage. They understood that a feather pattern isn't beautiful, it's practical. It scatters light, absorbs shadow, and blends motion into environment. This exact thinking shaped the British Denison smock, especially for airborne troops who dropped behind enemy lines and couldn't afford to be seen. What historians often miss is that these uniforms weren't designed on theory alone. They were tested in the field by having snipers hide in scrub and woodlands, and observing how far away they could remain undetected. Those tests produced the principle modern preppers should memorize. Colour matters far less than contrast. In other words, you don't blend by matching green. You blend by matching broken, irregular tones found in actual terrain. Every nation printed patterns, but the best concealment didn't come from cloth. It came from nature itself. The Finnish army used this better than anyone. They moved with their forests. Soldiers learned to cut branches, attach them to helmets, rifles and packs, and replace them hourly as wilted leaves changed colour. That small detail made them nearly invisible in the Winter War. Japanese jungle fighters, well, they really mastered the opposite environment. They used moisture-darkened soil, rotting palm fronds, and layers of moss to dampen shine, and, blend right into that thick humidity. They learned that skin reflects light unnaturally in the shadowed jungle, so they coated exposed arms and faces with mud or even crushed plant fibres to kill that reflection. Western militaries, honestly, didn't fully adopt that trick until later in the Pacific, when they realized that even the best helmet cover still couldn't replace living vegetation. This principle is, extremely relevant today. If you ever need concealment outdoors, whether for wildlife observation, off-trail navigation, or survival scenarios, your gear should never be the only layer. The environment itself should be part of your setup. Fresh foliage matches the colour, texture and sheen of the terrain because, well, it literally is the terrain. The Allies took camouflage in a different direction, deception at scale. The famous Ghost Army in Europe understood that if nature could help soldiers disappear, it could also help false armies seem real. They studied how tree lines distort perspective. They placed inflatable tanks in areas where natural foliage created believable shadow patterns. They used the shapes of hills and forest edges to control what German reconnaissance aircraft could and couldn't see. This wasn't artistic sleight of hand. It was strategic use of landscape features. If a hill blocked the right flank, they positioned decoy vehicles in the gap. And if the evening sun cast long shadows, they placed fake artillery where the shadows made them look heavier. The practical takeaway is this. Terrain isn't static. It's a tool. Whether you're setting up a concealed camp, storing gear off-grid, or simply trying not to draw attention, look for how light, shadow and elevation distort visibility. Soldiers who mastered that survived far longer than those who relied only on printed gear. You know, one of the most forgotten lessons of World War II camouflage is that even a perfect disguise will fail if you move the wrong way. German snipers, well, they trained by crawling just inches at a time, carefully using the natural sway of grass as their cover. Soviet scouts, on the other hand, would only advance through forests when the wind moved the branches overhead, blending their movements with nature itself. Marines in the Pacific learned to freeze completely when light hit them. These refinements came from trial and blood. Camouflage isn't about hiding. It's about becoming undetectable long enough to gain advantage. For modern application, the lesson is straightforward. You don't hide by crouching. You hide by blending your movements into the motion of the environment. Step when the wind moves. Shift only when shadows deepen. Pause when birds stop calling because something alerted them. So, how can you use these World War II camouflage principles today? Well, realistically, applying these lessons doesn't require any military gear at all. In fact, you know, these ideas can be used in all sorts of everyday situations, helping you blend in or stand out just as needed. If you're hiking, trekking, camping, or maybe practicing fieldcraft, start with 3 steps. First, reduce contrast before reducing colour. Dull the shine on your gear with dirt or a cloth wrap, and you know, avoid those hard edges. Second, supplement your clothing with natural materials from the actual terrain you're in, and remember to replace them as they age. Third, study the light. Every environment has a rhythm. Once you match it, concealment honestly becomes effortless. These techniques aren't theatrics. They're field-tested survival methods, born from soldiers who, well, had everything to lose if they were seen. If you want more deep-cut, historically accurate breakdowns like this, make sure you subscribe to The Prepper Historian and share this video with someone who'll appreciate the history and the skills behind it. This is knowledge worth keeping alive.